If you have any mind sense, you'll tell your mail pilot to throttle HQ. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 198th episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. If you missed number 197, go back to thesaleswhisperer.com/session 197. I had Mr. Gabriel Weinberg. He is taking on Google, and I think he's winning. He's got a secure browser. He started this as one of his several ventures. He had some ups and downs. He stuck with it, and now it is paying off. He then self-published a book that sold over 35,000 copies where he talks about gaining traction. So you want to check that episode out and go get yourself DuckDuckGo. That's the browser that I use on my iPhone. I use it on my computers. It is a non-spying browser. Trust me, you will thank me later that you got this. So again, Gabriel Weinberg is on session 197. Now, on our next episode, I get broken down like a shotgun. Steve Sisler, he is a behavioral personality assessment kind of guy. I'm kind of excited. He and I are speaking together in September at Fort Sill in Oklahoma for American Dream University. I just confirmed that. But he's a very interesting guy, very qualified in the space of personality assessments. And so I got to pick his brain for 30, 35 minutes. And then he had me take an assessment prior to our interview. And he goes through for about 30 minutes on my own assessment. And as Carlos will attest, I wake up angry, like he said. So be sure and tune in next week to see what that is all about. Also this week, I am getting set to launch the weekly live free workshop for the Make Every Sale program. As that rolls out and as people enroll, the price will go up. Lock in the lowest price you will ever be able to get this program now at makeeverysale.com. You get lifetime access. You get access to our private Facebook group where you get real-time interaction, get questions answered, feedback, and support. So again, check out makeeverysale.com. But now let's bring on this tech guru that is doing some big, exciting things from West Virginia, Alexander Obenauer. Alexander Obenauer, all the way from Blacksburg, Virginia. Welcome to the Sales Podcast, man. How are you?
Thank you so much, Wes. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. But hey, I asked the questions here, okay? Don't be turning things around, okay? I gotta maintain some control here, some semblance of order, you know? So, man, Christopher recommended you. And Christopher, it's so funny. He referred me to you, but I'm interviewing you before I interview him. What the heck's going on with that?
I don't know. He's a humble dude.
So, but I do have him lined up. So he had to reschedule on me. So that's all right. So our guests have that interview to look forward to. But you have an interesting background, entrepreneur. You got many businesses here, and I'll let you kind of steer the discussion where you'd like to go. But if you wouldn't mind, give our listeners a little thumbnail sketch of who you are and what you do, and we'll dive down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I graduated from Virginia Tech in 2012, and it was during my senior year that I came up with an idea for a new kind of email client. I called it Mail Pilot and put it on Kickstarter. And that probably sounds lighter than it really was. It was months and months of prep, and that went into that. Too often I hear people that come to me and they'll say, "Hey, I'm launching a Kickstarter tomorrow. Any tips?" And my first one is asking me that question like 3-4 months ago. But so we spent months putting together a Kickstarter campaign, launched it in January of 2012. And it actually, and, you know, as total unknowns, just undergrads, here at Virginia Tech and, with no network, no experience. And luckily we were able to, end up raising $54,000 in 5 weeks. And that was thanks in a huge part to all 1,600 of our backers who became huge brand champions. And a couple of, really good press mentions, like in the New York Times, David Pogue called Mail Pilot ingenious, like a week into the campaign, which was nuts. I figured, okay, this is it. We've hit the top, and it's all downhill from here. But luckily that wasn't the case. So with the campaign ended in February of 2012, and I still had 3 months to graduate. So senioritis hit really hard, really fast. So we used the 54,000 to launch MindSense, an overarching company to start, bringing products to market, to start, spinning up this engine, this kind of innovation engine, if you will, of finding really tough problems that no one really seems to be able to solve well, problems that plague people, and really figuring out how do we solve these in a great way? How can we knock this out of the park? How can we create some really world-class products that make people, a lot more productive, a lot more efficient, a lot more cost-effective, a lot happier? And so we brought MailPilot to market that year. It did so well that when we launched it on the iPhone and then later on the Mac, we were lucky to have Apple feature it at pretty much every single one of our launches in different capacities, sometimes with the banner on the front page of the App Store and sometimes under that Best New App section. And it was our Mac app launch in January of 2014 that actually became the number one. It took the top paid app spot for the entire Mac App Store. And it actually took that spot in 58 countries by the end of the year. So that's kind of the MailPilot summary. It did some incredible things. It put out some really interesting ideas that you'll find in a lot of modern email clients today, including like Inbox by Gmail. And since then, we've continued to keep that innovation engine, if you will, running. We've put a lot of ideas through our process. We're very much married to our process, not to any one specific product or result of that process. And so that process births new ideas every month. But the next one that we really knew, this is a knock out of the park idea, was one that we ended up calling Throttle. And this is a service that looks at really the root of that email problem. So I'm sure you're well aware. It's got to be even worse for you, Wes. You've got tons of important email in your inbox, but it's buried by all these coupons because you bought something one time, newsletters that you actually wanted to read, but they come at the wrong time, so you always archive them, and then spam, right? When a company sells your email address and you get email from a company and you have no idea why. And so Throttle allows you to actually control who can send you email in an airtight way for the first time, which is an insane feeling once you really dive into it. But it also lets you find out who tries to sell or steal your email address and shut them down. It allows you to combine all those mass mailings you receive throughout the day into a single daily digest email so you can reduce interruptions. And probably most importantly, solving the crux of the email problem, it allows you to stop giving out your email address online. So you can still do everything that you want to do online, but without having to compromise your inbox and your time. And so we really knew that this was a great product. We developed it all year last year, brought it to market in January. It was listed on a number of sites like Betalist and Product Hunt, which I know, Wes, you just started diving into in the episode you posted just today with David. And both of those platforms I can speak to very highly of. They did amazing things for our launch. And it actually ended up taking the number one spot on Product Hunt for the day that it launched. And it actually ended up joining the 1,000 Club. So it's one of the rare few launches that has over 1,000 votes on Product Hunt. Which was incredibly humbling, but it was really cool to get to interact with that community, chat with them about the concept, about the product, about the execution, and about really where it should go. So it did so well. We really realized we needed to get this solution out to everybody. We made it freemium 2 months later, so just a month ago. And it saw a whole bunch of coverage when it relaunched as a freemium product on TechCrunch and Lifehacker and a couple other blogs that we do love. So Throttle has been doing phenomenally well as a freemium product. So it's been really interesting to see, because we've kind of seen everything from crowdfunding to the one-time paid app sales model to SaaS to freemium SaaS, all in B2C. But it's been really interesting to kind of see all of these different launches. But so now we're a growing team of 6 here in Blacksburg, Virginia. We deeply believe in our process for innovation. We deeply believe in our, the importance of a team and focusing on strengths. And that's kind of where we are today.
Man, that's amazing. So where do we begin? Let's go back to the beginning. So you're in college, and most people would say, oh, that's a bad time, and I got to focus, and school's so busy. What what gave you the entrepreneurial bug, and compelled you and drove you to jump into this when, I mean, you could have had senioritis already, right? Just kind of coast. You're at a good school, probably had good jobs lined up, or certainly the potential. But what caused you to make that shift and follow this thread down this new venture?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I had senioritis since I was in the fourth grade, honestly.
Yep.
But probably much to my parents' dismay, I was always just always a problem solver. Always, tinkering with, looking at different things that we take as official and thinking about how they could be better. I've always done that. And I did that all the way through college. I launched a couple of just like not like startups or anything, but little things like little apps that solved this little problem. I launched one that solved a little problem for the university community on campus. It's a tiny audience. It was a free application. It did nothing for me except solve a problem. And I really wanted to just solve problems. And I always had the appetite for that. And a couple of those apps that I launched throughout college ended up in the New York Times and Washington Post, and a couple other places, just because, they might have been dumb little things that I wrote in 2 days, but it was valuable. It was solving a problem that a bunch of people had. And so I think it was ultimately that I can't get away. It's almost like an addiction to solve unsolved problems that, bright minds have gone up against and haven't been able to really knock out of the park, and really get down to the root of the problem, really figure out what's going on and how to solve it in a really elegant, world-class way. I've really always been addicted to that challenge. And so I was always doing that throughout college, but it was once I came up with the idea for Mail Pilot, and I showed it to one of my professors, a brilliant guy, an architect by training and trade, but a computer science professor at Tech. He worked at Xerox PARC in the 80s when they were like inventing the mouse. He a really critical guy though too. I mean, he would cut you down in an instant. And I went to his office hours and showed him the idea, my very crazy looking sketchings on a couple of pages in my notebook, and he immediately just said, "Wow, this is amazing. You need to move forward on this." And as I started talking it out with more and more people and iterating the concept and iterating the language around the concept, I kept getting two responses from people. People kept saying, "I want this now," and I would pay a lot of money for this. And so that's really when I knew, this isn't like one of my previous app ideas that I should just make and release. This is something totally different. It's possible I might be able to start a company with this. And so that's what I ultimately tried to do. And I figured Kickstarter would be a great first place to start, because it would allow me a lot of autonomy. And I assumed the campaign would fail, of course. But I figured give that a try first before looking at other sources of funding.
So why'd you think it would fail?
We were asking for a lot. To date, as far as I could tell, when we had started putting our Kickstarter campaign together, no closed source software product had ever raised what we were looking to raise. The closest one was Dark Sky. If you've ever used Dark Sky, it's a phenomenal weather app, but they started on Kickstarter, and they raised, I want to say it was $34,000, and we set our goal at 35. And that was largely because we wanted to start a company. We didn't want to just develop a one-time app and put it out there and walk away. We wanted to spin up that engine for innovation. But ultimately, it was because we were raising a lot and we were totally unknown. So if you talk to any Kickstarter campaign creator today, successful anyway, they'll tell you that the day they launched was really like 5 months before the launch of the campaign. That they were drumming up all these backers that were going to hit it on day one, over the course of months, and that was something we couldn't really do. I mean, we had family and friends that said, "Sure, totally, I'll go on and pitch in a couple bucks." But other than that, we were completely unconnected. I had no real experience, starting a company or even running a crowdfunding campaign. We had really no network in the industry whatsoever. We quickly gained one as we started making a lot of headway and traction on Kickstarter. A lot of really interesting folks started reaching out. But before then, I just figured, we're nobodies, we're unknowns. We don't know how to go about marketing anything. It was something I had never done before. So I truly believed it would fail. And in our category, something like 22% of projects succeeded at the time. And given that our goal was so much higher, I could only have assumed our potential success rate should have been far lower than that 22%.
Man, that's amazing. All right, I still want to go back to the beginning, though.
Okay, sounds good.
Back. So you're this tinkerer, you're this smart kid. Why did you go to college? Were you just still trying to kind of find yourself? Was it just kind of the normal expected path, and so you did what was expected, and then things kind of evolved, or did you know, like, hey, I'm going to get a degree in engineering or something, and then and that'll help me be a better tinkerer / entrepreneur?
Yeah, ultimately, I think it was really like during most of high school, I knew there's no way I'm going to college. That does not sound like fun to me. But ultimately, I'm very lucky that my father deeply believes in higher education, and he really hated the idea of me not going to college. And so I really went because it was kind of the expected path, honestly. But once I was at Tech, I really quickly saw the value of being at a large university like it. I think the curriculum was great, but I think far more than that has a big benefit of going through and getting my undergraduate degree has been the network, honestly, working with a lot of like-minded folks for 4 years, and having being able to kind of tap into that Hokie Nation network, knowing some folks that you've interviewed on your podcast, and a handful of folks between faculty and alumni, and my fellow students at the time. It was such a huge benefit, and ultimately too, I think I absolutely needed to mature. And it gave me a lot of leeway to do that, where I could take leadership positions in student organizations and really learn what it means to grow and build a meaningful team, learn what it means to be, a strengths-centered team. I learned far more in student organizations and in leadership positions within them than I ever thought that I would, that have really, really tremendously helped me as I'm building up my team at my company.
So did you learn how to delegate, who's bringing the beer, who's bringing the beer bong, who's bringing the cups for the
exactly.
What's the this
for
came
the beer,
after me the table
and the flip cup? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's good. You got to know that stuff.
Exactly. It's important life skills.
Who's got the cooler? Who's bringing the ice? Who's scouting out for the campus police?
Yep. I was always the grill guy for tailgates. I always brought the grill.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, I was at the Air Force Academy, and they have what they call MWR in the military, and that's morale, welfare, and recreation.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the military, so the academy, you get all these positions that mirror the same jobs in the actual Air Force. And so, you're as a senior, you're basically an officer. You get these officer jobs. As a junior, you get like a senior NCO, sophomore, junior NCO, and then the freshmen just get beat on. But every year, I was the MWR guy, so I was always the one. Because A, I got to organize the parties, and B, I got to stock them. And so I could leave campus and go shopping and get all the good stuff that everybody really wanted deep down. So, hey, I can relate to that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, my sister actually went to the Naval Academy, and she never told me about anything like that. So now I'm going to have to check back with her.
Well, she was probably one of the good girls. I barely made it out of there. But, hey, I made it out. But I made it possible for many others to make it out.
Yep.
I've really boosted the morale, the welfare, and the recreation. I'm just saying. But I digress. All right, so you're there, you're figuring stuff out, you're networking with other smart people, you're getting ideas, and so you create a few things, you give them away. What made you flip that switch from, hey, this is just something cool I'm going to give to the college versus I'm going to show my professor and go try to make money with this?
At the time I was interviewing for jobs and meeting with some fantastic people, absolutely. But I think it was starting to dawn on me how much of an independent spirit I am. I love autonomy very much to a fault. I really didn't do well in high school. Rules are painful to me. And so as I was interviewing for jobs, I was starting to look at the cubicle farms that, many computer science majors are relegated to. And, it really didn't speak to me. And so when I came up for the idea, for Mail Pilot, and people started telling me, I really want this. I would buy this for my company. I would pay the money for this. That's when I knew, wow, this might be a shot. So right when we started the Kickstarter campaign, I stopped interviewing for all the jobs that I was interviewing for. And I was pretty far along in the process in a couple of them. But I just kind of stopped, figuring if I had no net, then when my Kickstarter campaign would eventually fail in February, that then I'd have 3 months to figure out how to make it happen. Luckily, though, the campaign didn't fail.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess the common thread in all of these is, you were following your passion, you were following what you were naturally inclined towards, and you were just seeking to solve problems, right? Versus, hey, I'm going to write some code and go make $1 million. Did you ever have that attitude, or was it just, I'm going to solve problems and we'll see what happens?
Yeah, it was really the latter. And sometimes when I admit that, people, are a little disappointed by maybe my lack of ambition financially. But that hasn't really spoken to me. And that's probably caused me to make a few missteps if you were to look at the business strictly from a financial perspective, and a maximizing profits perspective. But ultimately it's been the solving meaningful problems. If my number one goal was to get rich, I'd probably be doing something far, far different. But it's amazed me how well this has done, that how well I could just pursue what I really am passionate about and what I really care about and what I think I'm pretty good at, and just do it really well every day. And so far the money has followed, and it's followed really surprisingly well, I think.
So I just realized, you're a millennial, right? You're not supposed to be doing anything productive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Luckily I don't have time for any of that nonsense yet.
Very cool. So I don't remember the commercial. It was years ago. And I want to say it was even a Super Bowl commercial, but these people, they're launching, right? And they all get together, their site's going live, and they're all gathered around to see if an order comes in, right? And they wait and they wait and they wait, and then bing, an order comes in, and they all cheer yes, this works, and then it's like a speed racer. Brrr, the orders really come in, and they look at each other and they're like, oh man, what do we do now, right? It was too popular. So what happened? What's going through your mind when, you went for 35 grand and you got 54 grand? I got to imagine you and your buddy, was it just you really at the time, or did you have partners?
Yeah, I had one co-founder at the time. Yeah.
Okay. So, were y'all looking at each other like, oh man, money is still coming in. This is bigger than we thought. What do we do now? Did fear ever kind of sink in, this is too big, or was it just total excitement? You're like, okay, now we know what to do.
Yeah, I think fear didn't ever hit in during that. So that process was very similar to that commercial for us. It wasn't as Hollywood-esque, but it was very, very similar. I had set up, so Kickstarter shoots you an email every time you have a new backer, which sounds horrible, but is kind of awesome. So I set up a rule in my email client to make a sound every time one of those emails came in, just so we would hear it. Even if I wasn't looking, we would hear it. And we were working out of the spare bedroom in my college apartment. And so, and it was plugged into my speakers. And yeah, I mean, like the first couple of days, it would just like keep binging and keep binging. And we were just like shocked, but really excited. And fear was never a reaction that we had, which I think is due to an immense amount of naivety that I think is entirely necessary to start a company. And so I think that was very much a good thing. We should have been very afraid, but it's a very good thing that we weren't. So we were just incredibly excited. When we passed 100%, I expected us to level off entirely. But it kept growing at the same rate that it had grown before we had hit the 100% mark on Kickstarter. And yeah, it was pure excitement. It was pure excitement that we could put our ideas out into the world. And yeah, I mean, they received a ton of criticism, absolutely. But obviously received a ton of praise and were incredibly welcome among, a weirdly large audience, given that we had absolutely none beforehand. It was just sheer excitement to get to do something that we were so passionate about, right out of college.
Very cool. So now you got money. How do you know what to do with it? You got $54,000. I mean, You're still in college. You'll never run a business. I mean, what kept you from like getting, Mind Sense or Male Pilot tattoos, and Rolex watches and saying, yeah, we got a business? Yeah.
Luckily, if it weren't for my everyone around me would have stopped me immediately. But luckily, I mean, I think we were hell bent on our goal, and so we squandered the money making the product well before we could go down to the tattoo parlor, which is a very good thing. And because especially at the time, the Male Pilot logo was not nearly as nice as it is now, so that would be a very embarrassing tattoo to go have removed. But we really, I honestly think it was just, we were just so obsessed with, kind of what we were working towards and to building a new platform on which we could grow the next thing, if you will. We intentionally called the company MindSense and not, Male Pilot Incorporated, because I knew, I didn't want to just build one product. If you look at some phenomenal companies like Dropbox and Evernote who built these phenomenal products in 2007, 2008, but then they kind of stopped innovating. Like there was this incredible innovative process that came up with these ideas, but now they're really just features of operating systems. And I always knew I didn't want to end up there, that I wanted to keep that spirit of innovation alive all the time. So we named the company MindSense intentionally because we knew we wanted to keep spinning more things up. So we knew that even with the money, even with Male Pilot launch, like that wasn't the end, that there was still a much bigger kind of goal to be driving after.
So how do you know what to do, though? I mean, you've raised this money, and now this app was just like kind of built, or was it mostly built? Because
it was
people
like
never know how to proceed, right? What's the first step? A lot of people would mess up. They'd go get an office. They'd go sign a 3-year lease and go get letterhead and business cards and new corporate phones, and next thing you know, they're out of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we absolutely had our stumbles. We charged the same for international shipping for some of our kickbacks that we did for domestic. We basically made no money on many of those tiers for our international backers. We got some really nice business cards that we absolutely should not have been splurged on. They were like almost $1 a piece. So we definitely made some missteps. Luckily, those missteps were incredibly minor. They didn't do any big damage to us. What we did spend on, I mean, we knew ultimately we spent an immense amount of money on servers. We were lucky enough to have Rackspace fold us into their Rackspace startup program, which at the time I think was only really given to Y Combinator companies. But we had a Hokie who had started a company, a Virginia Tech alum who had started a company that Rackspace had purchased a few years back. And he folded us into the program, which was phenomenal because it gave us $2,000 a month worth of hosting. That was phenomenal because we didn't realize how expensive it would be to host a full, in the cloud email client that interacts with your email server. And so we were spending thousands a month on hosting. But luckily, being in that startup program offset the cost back down to about where we had expected it to be. And then really it was just, most of it really just kind of went to paying us for 6 months so that we could focus full time, and probably full time times two, for that first 6 months, so that we wouldn't need to, look for jobs right out of graduation, much to the dismay of many of our mentors and folks. But luckily it worked out. It worked out okay.
Yeah, I've got to imagine. I mean, you graduate with a good degree from a good school, and everybody's like, "Well, go get a quote unquote good job." Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, and that's that catch-22, right? Of seeking advice, but then also following your gut. Because the outsiders may not know the trend. They may not see the real problem the way you do. So how do you juggle, listening to mentors and following your gut?
Oh, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be so rich. I think that's a problem that I have. I've bounced back and forth on that spectrum so much. That's such a tough one. I think you really hit a really interesting problem, especially for entrepreneurs. I think you really hit it on the head there. I've stumbled far more times by ignoring my gut and going with the advice of mentors and folks high up in our industry. And very rarely have I regretted doing the opposite. So I've really learned that I need to go with my gut far more often. It's hard. We were working with some folks at very, very large companies that we've looked up to for a very long time. And they would give us data points that we just wouldn't have access to, or that really no one in the market would have access to except for them. And we'd follow their advice, follow their data points. But ultimately, you're right. Like, only we have our data points, right? So, only we can make I think the best gut level decisions, because I've been experiencing my company every single day for the last 4 years. And no one else that's not on the team, has. So it's a very delicate balance, but I think I could be wrong, but I think for myself, I need to trust my gut, like, at least 80% of the time. I think it's incredibly important to learn from, mentors and folks that have been in our shoes before. But I think for me, what I try to do is I try to hear their experiences and hear their stories, not their advice. Their advice are lessons they would give to themselves, a younger version of themselves. But that's not necessarily gospel for everyone else.
Right.
And so I try to, especially when someone really smart tries to give me advice, I try to tease out the story, like what experience did they have that led them to that advice. And that goes into a data bank somewhere in your mind. And you get to synthesize that with tons of other really smart people's experiences. And then from there, you get to grow those gut level decisions that are a little bit better educated from all those mentors' experiences. But it's still that gut level decision that comes from you and your experiences and your vision. Right. And so that's kind of what I try to do. I don't know if that sounded absolutely crazy, but that's what I try to do.
No, I mean, that's awesome. And I don't know if you can answer this, I mean, based on your age, but, if you're talking to somebody, I mean, I'm 46. I got into sales, I was 27. I had a wife, a kid, another kid on the way, but I'm constantly talking to people that are 36, 46, 56. They've got debt. They've got expectations, right? Responsibilities that you didn't have when you were launching this. But do you have advice for somebody that maybe has a dream? They're dying in that cubicle farm. Do you have advice for some older folks that are maybe with those responsibilities on how to listen to that little gut, listen to that little voice, and pursue a dream?
Yeah, I think I would have absolutely no place to give advice there. But what I have seen work really well, I have some friends that have already kind of experienced that in their first or second job out of college, and they're absolutely miserable, and it doesn't speak to them, and they're not excited about it, and they wake up later and later every morning, and they just don't love it, and they have dreams for things that really matter to them and things they do want to start. And what I've seen work really well is when they care enough about it, is they put in the hours, nights and weekends on lunch breaks, and they start some amazing things. And it takes a while. It takes a long while. Like it takes 2 years sometimes to get something to the point that from nights and weekends that you can leave your job and jump to that. But man, I've seen it be so worth it. So there's no way I have any position to give any advice to anyone in that situation. It's not something I've lived, and even if I've lived it, I would have only have lived it once so far. But what I can say is that I've certainly seen a ton of my friends that have kind of wanted to break into starting their own company or their own organization. When they care so much about it, they really carve out that time on nights and weekends. And they drive after it, and they allow maybe their sometimes depressing job from 9 to 5. They allow it to be more of a motivator instead of kind of a detractor, if you will.
Sure. That's great advice. Yeah, because that's what I tell people, and I did that multiple times. Whether when I was preparing to leave the Air Force or when I found myself in a job that wasn't what I wanted and I had that entrepreneurial itch, it did take nights and weekends and it did take time. But it's so worth it.
And not to ask you a question, sorry, but like how long did it take you? Just curious.
Oh, well, it really depends. In the Air Force, I took 2 years to get ready, getting my securities licenses and some experience while I was still in the Air Force. And that job ended up being crap. And I got into another job that I had to take because I was unemployed and had a wife and 2 kids. But it turned out to be fantastic. Then I was recruited into high tech right at the, February of 2000, right? And I started, so they started recruiting me. And so I think it was June of 2000 that I joined them. Well, the .com implosion was building up steam. So I survived for 4 years there. But I just told the story in the last podcast interview. I survived. I was the last person hired as an assistant manager in this region. And I was the last one fired, which was nice. But even though I was the youngest and least experienced, but it was 4 years, 15 reorganizations, and 8 layoffs.
That's amazing.
So it was just constant, gossip. Hey, what's the new deal now? And so that sucked. But so I kept, but then we had a third child. But that's when I got my real estate license. I was starting to rehab and flip houses. I actually built my first 2 spec homes then, and they were disasters, but I learned. So I was always doing things, but I was always succeeding in sales. And so I just went back to my sweet spot, which was selling and then sales training. And so, it was an iterative process over many years and several careers, so it was a bit of a grind at times, but man, I look around at people seeing their layoffs and their stories and, I'd rather be in charge of my own destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Sometime you should discuss how you think a layoff should be best done after seeing that many.
Oh man. Yeah. I don't know. My advice is always on the other end, for I'm talking with, one of my cousins right now, and she's in a very commoditized industry, and their company's clamping down. And so, I told her what my dad told me years ago, and it was do what's best for you when it's best for you, because your company will do what's best for them when it's best for them. Mm-hmm. And it sounds kind of unappreciative and whatnot, right? But it's not saying slough off, you give them your best, but when things aren't going your way, or it's, they're going down a path you can't get behind, then find something new, and make that change. If it's best for you, don't, because people are like, oh, they've been so good to me. And, oh, but they got good benefits and I really like the manager. I don't want to let them down, and then bam, the next day they're fired, right? Or laid off. And
right.
I gave them 8 years of my best life, blah, blah, blah. And look, it's just business. Mm-hmm. So always be looking, always be getting better. I always tell people, if the Cleveland Cavaliers, if the owner said, I hate basketball, I am disbanding my team, I'm not selling it, I got permission from the league, I'm just closing this team, would LeBron James have any problem getting another job. Right? I mean, he would be picked up. Somebody would make room for him, right?
Yep.
In the other 31 teams. So if you're always the best, you don't have anything to worry about. Even, like I said, I was laid off twice when I was over quota. So I mean, it was nothing I could have done. It was just, it was a declining industry, a declining company, and it's just, they were firing everybody. So it's just, it will happen. So always be preparing, get as good as you can, give as much as you can, but, look for new opportunities.
Yep. Yeah, man. I think that's a message that a lot more people need to get on board with, need to hear and understand.
Yeah. So tell me about your process. You talked about, like in the very beginning, you talked about innovation, and you talked about how you just have, like you said, you're married to the process, not the product. I mean, is this something kind of new that you think you've sort of created, or did you find and just implement some best practices, maybe better than others in this process?
Yeah, I think it's something very old that we've resurrected. I can take no credit for it. I think it's something that we've kind of unearthed, dusted off, and taken a real hack at. I was surrounded by a bunch of very phenomenal, brilliant, and ambitious fellow students of mine as an undergrad, and they very much wanted to start a company. Like, that was their goal. Was like, I want to start a company. And so they would chase every fad, every trend, certainly far too late. They didn't realize it, but that's fine. And they would often build entirely meaningless things. Like, they would solve problems that just aren't problems, or like problems that are problems for college students, which, that's not a demographic that pays very well. Or they would solve problems that, that's a problem, but nobody's willing to pay for that solution. And, they would, be coming up with the next, whatever mobile game. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. They were learning a ton, which is phenomenal. And I have nothing against that. But what I noticed in myself was that, the way my thought process was different was, it's not about the product or the solution. It's way more about the problem. And so really our process, it's old, it's simple, it's just talking to people constantly about problems, asking people, what is your biggest problem? What is your most unnecessary time drain? What is your most unnecessary expense? Asking the 5 whys, really digging deep into it to find out what is the root issue. It's just digging deep into it, just constantly talking to people about problems. Too often I see fellow entrepreneurs just like launch into conversations with potential customers, showing off the solution, which is ridiculous if you think about it for a second, because they don't understand they don't understand the person on the other side of the table. They don't understand that person's problems. They don't understand that person's motivations or their goals or why they might care. And so it's really understanding people's problems and understanding the language that people put around those problems. And only then, once we find a problem that really resonates with a lot of people, and truly resonates with people, then we consider solutions and we talk about solutions with people, and we constantly iterate those things with people in conversations. I think there's too much of this myth of the lonely visionary who's sitting in a stark room and comes up with a brilliant idea all on their own. And I'm not saying that can't work, but what our process has been is the exact opposite, is having tons of conversations with people, because that's the only way that we're going to really understand how to solve a problem so well, that'll be something incredibly worth paying for, that the second someone sees it, they say, I really want this now, and I'll pay for this. So we find a problem that resonates with people first. I'll never talk about a solution in a conversation with someone, in a first conversation with someone. Then we find a solution that resonates with people. Then we really iterate that thing. We iterate the language on it. We iterate the concept. We simplify it. We connect it with reality. Our ideas for MailPilot were so out there that they wouldn't have worked on today's email protocols. But we had to connect them to today's technology. We had to figure out how to engineer them to work on today's technology. And so I think that's kind of the core of our process. It's a lot more. I think it gets far more interesting than that once you dive into the details. A lot of our process for our products so far, since they're all consumer-facing products, has been looking at a problem what I like to do is when we pull together a new problem, like with Throttle, we figured out the problem is the root of the email volume problem is that we have no control over who can get into our inbox, right? Like when you give out your email address online, it's like giving out the key to your house. Anyone can dump anything they want into your inbox, and there's nothing you can really do about it. Like there are things you can do about it, but they take time and they're kind of annoying. So that's kind of the root of the problem, is that giving out our email addresses online, that's just an incredibly broken system. And so I like to ask, two questions of the team. What does the simplest solution look like for the user? And what does the best solution look like technically? And then we marry the two. And that takes a lot of glue code in the middle. It takes a lot of effort, but we can make the thing far better that way. So with Throttle, the thought was, okay, well, on all these email subscribe forms and signups, what does the simplest solution look like? And the answer was just a button, an authorized button. That, like, I just want to hit a button that says I authorize this site, this sender, to send me email. Like, that would be the simplest solution, a button. And what would the best solution look like technically? And technically, it would be giving every sender a different email address to send me email so I can shut them down really easily. And so I can tell if they've sold my email address and do a couple of other really interesting things. That would be the best technical solution. Now, that technical solution is technically impossible. Like, it would be incredibly unusable to create all those email accounts and give out and manage all these email addresses. The simplest solution, also impossible. There's no way to just click a button and it to just authorize this sender to send me email, because that's just not how the email protocol and ecosystem works. But, we figured out how to marry those two with this really neat system of a browser extension that puts that button in there. You hit it. The back-end system generates the unique email address to give to each sender. It's a different email address for each sender. So you get the benefits of the most, and then all the email that is sent to those email addresses you generate, it combines into a single Daily Digest email. And then, when you want to stop receiving email from someone, you can hit revoke access next to that unique generated email address. It shuts down that email address. They have no way into your inbox anymore. We had a beta tester. His email address was sold by a really sketchy website. He received over 5,000 emails, and he hit the revoke access button, destroyed that email address. None of them had any way into his inbox anymore. But so it's marrying that simplest solution with the best technical solution under the hood, and you get that really great user experience of the simplest solution. And we just really have to work hard to ideate on and engineer the glue in the middle. And the glue in the middle is really kind of the magic of what makes Throttle work and tick so well. It's something that has worked really well. That process worked really well for MailPilot. It worked really well for Throttle, but it's not new. My favorite example is it's the toilet. It sounds stupid, but it's true. The best solution for a toilet, for the user, the simplest solution for the user, is a button. Just make me hit a button to flush. Like, that's all I wanted. Just make me hit a button. But the best technical solution would be a thing that would need pumps instead of power. So like using a siphon instead, so that it doesn't go down with electricity, so that it doesn't even consume electricity. But, managing, interacting with a system as a user like that might be incredibly complex. But so the idea is that you figure out, the glue is what's in between. You figure out, I as user push a lever, it pulls a chain that lifts a stopper that's filled with air so that then it floats on top of the water until the tank drains, which causes the bowl to fill, triggering the siphon, and the whole thing flushes without any pumps or power. And that's all from the push of a button. And so it's the exact same kind of concept, if you will. It's the best technical solution married with the simplest user experience, if you will. And when we've done that, we found that we've been able to be trump the competitors really handily. Because the whatever we come up with is just far easier for the user to implement, for them to use, and they're using a far more powerful product, if you will.
Very cool. What you explained early on in that little segment is the fact that you are secretly a sales whisperer.
How's that?
You didn't even realize it.
I didn't.
Well, I don't know. You ever heard of the ABCs of selling?
I don't think so.
All right. That's old school stuff, man. It's all the old sales guys. ABCs of selling. Okay. Always be closing.
Yep. Okay.
Right? And I'm like, that's crap. Nobody likes to get hard closed. And I always say, I think the new ABCs are always be courteous, always be curious, always be concise, right? And so on that curious side, I always tell people, I have successfully sold stocks and bonds. I've sold mobile homes in Mobile, Alabama. I have sold recruiting services, real estate, high tech, and multiple areas of high tech around the country. Sold $1 million of stuff to Google, even though I didn't even know how to barely turn the equipment on, because I can ask questions. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's like, okay, here's the product. Like, what pain does it solve? Who does it solve it for? Okay, great. I'll go find those people and ask if they have that pain. And it really is that simple. And people want to overcomplicate things. Like I sell the software Infusionsoft. And I've been one of the top resellers in the world, despite having basically no team. I have some VAs, some contractors. But some of the guys I sell against have 20, 30 employees, right? But here I am selling just about as much as they are with 1/20th the staff. And it's because I don't sit around and demo the stuff. I don't get in deep. I'm just like, ask their pain. Like, why are we talking? Why do you think you're interested in this software? What are you doing now to solve that pain? Okay, how much is it costing you in time and money and anxiety and angst and personnel turnover because you hire an expert and once they learn it, they leave? Just ask these questions. They're like, okay, yeah, you're a fit. Let's get started.
Yep, yeah.
And it really is that simple. And people want to make it so hard.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that. Courteous, curious, and concise. Hopefully I've got curious.
Yep.
Hopefully I've got courteous. I might need to work on concise.
Well, you do. I mean, as long as you're asking the question, as long as you show up, not intending. Like I told people, I sold a lot of high tech, and it was always, hey, bring a demo, bring the literature, bring the PowerPoint presentation, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's crap.
Yep.
I mean, I would show up with a notebook. Mm-hmm. Right? For me to take notes.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, what's going on, folks? Tell me about your life. Tell me about what's going on technologically. What do you have now? And, and I remember they hired this new VP. At one point, I had the 18 western states of the United States. That's why I moved to California, because my wife's from here, and I was traveling out here more than she was. And literally staying at her parents' house. I'm like, hey, honey, how you doing? How are the kids? Well, your parents say hello. All right, got to go. And he's like, you got to give more presentations. And I was like, dude, there's 33 salespeople in this company worldwide. I said, last year, 3 people made quota. I was one of the 3. And in 18 months, I have not given one presentation. Mm-hmm. And he was like, yeah, okay, well, don't give any more presentations.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
I just ask questions. Oh, man.
Yep.
Well, we can go.
I was meeting with a student just a couple days ago, and they've got a really interesting idea. He was asking me what do I do next, and he hasn't even spoken to any potential customers yet. And I was like, well, you don't even know if they want that. Like, you need to go chat with them. He was like, all right, great, I'll put together a demo. I have some slides. I was like, no, don't go in with answers. Go in with questions. Right? Like, go in and have the best questions. And I told him, you probably shouldn't say any sentence that ends with a period the whole time you're there for the first visit.
There you go.
Only questions. So I'm curious to see if he takes me up on that. But I think he looked at me like I was crazy. So we'll see.
Okay, look, you have to quit talking about this, because I cannot code and develop software, but you can obviously sell. So we can't let people know that you're a great salesman, because then they would have no need. They would come to you for sales training and for software, and I would be out of a job. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That would not be good. You know how many kids I have? You got to make a lot of money to feed my kids. So I'm just saying, stop being a salesman. Okay, just don't do it. You can't be a better sales whisperer than the sales whisperer.
Can't beat the sales whisperer.
All right, man. Well, this has been fantastic. I think we could go for 12 hours.
We probably could.
I'm going to link. I have all your links to all of your companies, but and we'll put these in the show notes. But anyone in particular you want to mention, somebody. I always tell my guests, picture the listener. They're jogging, right? Maybe they're on a plane. They don't have Wi-Fi. They're driving the car. Where do we want to tell them to go that they'll remember? And then what do you want them to do when they get there?
In terms of links?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love for them to check out Throttle. It's free. If you want to save your inbox and your time, if you're, running, if you want to run more, try Throttle. It's free to use. It's throttlehq.com. Hopefully that's easy enough to remember.
Throttle headquarters, throttlehq.com. All right, very cool. And we will link to that as well. And get yourself some free email to throttle the spam. Very nice. Well, thank you, sir. Mr.
Hey, Wes, thank you so much.
Obenauer, all the way from Blacksburg. This has been fantastic.
I appreciate you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your time today. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
What a great story, huh? I hope you get half as motivated listening to these as I do speaking to these guys. Hearing his story, how he put it on Kickstarter, he expected to fail, and then things blew up. How they followed his dreams, how he listened to his gut. That's the role of your intuition, right? You've got to go out and obviously surround yourself with smart people that are looking out for you. But at the end of the day, it's your business. It's your call. You have to live with the decisions. If you're not comfortable, if that little voice is keeping you awake at night, you need to listen to that little voice and follow it, regardless of what the mentors and advisors are telling you. Maybe you'll learn down the road that they were right, but you know what? You won't be able to live with yourself if you don't follow your little voice on something that's really nagging. So I love the way these guys, they were motivated, right? Living out of their apartment, turned down jobs, saw the cubicle farm, knew it wasn't right for them. They listened to their advisors when he spoke with his, that very sharp professor, he said, and that guy was fired up, said he would pay for it. So, he didn't necessarily go against his advisors, right? When he listened to his gut, he sought out smart people, and maybe it was his intuition telling him which of his advisors to listen to. But at the end of the day, he followed his dream, followed his passion, followed his intuition. But there's a lot of science when you really listen to this. He's a salesman. I think he knows it now, but, great salespeople just ask great questions. Like he talked about, he just asks what the problem is, and he digs down. And once he understands the problem, then he's like, okay, what does it look like to solve that problem? And then they go about solving the problem. And that's how you make a successful business. Just, Zig Ziglar always said, if you can help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. So go out and solve problems, and your problems will be solved in the process. And like I say, make sure and listen to this over and over again. There's little gems in every episode that you just miss. This thing is over 40 minutes long. You may not be able to focus the whole time. Maybe you're jotting notes and you miss something. So listen again. Head over to thesaleswhisperer.com/session 198 for the show notes. I link to their company. I link to MailPilot, to Throttle HQ, to MindSense, so as well as Alexander's website. So a lot of links there. And like I said, several notes for you as well. As I mentioned at the top of the show, check out makeeverysale.com. As I do these live interactive workshops, we'll keep adding to the price. So lock in the lowest price ever right now. Makeeverysale.com. Thanks for listening. Share this episode. Share with a friend. And remember to sell different.